Welcome everybody to another episode of the Beyond Trade podcast. I'm your host, Liev Dalton. If you're new around here, consider subscribing or following the show. It'd be much appreciated. Give us a like, review, comment, subscribe if you find the show informative in any way. If you've been following the show, that's a great way to support us. So, uh, always sharing is the best way to get the word out and to really show the support. So, we have a great guest today. We have Mr. Jones. We have a um, encountered his work there quite a while ago now, over a year, and really healthy perspective on a lot of topics, very holistic, something I'm striving to do. I think he has offers a really healthy perspective, so great place to start. I find a lot of topics we could get into that are so like against what you grow up believing. We're told this certain agenda growing up, and even some of the things in the health community, you think, oh well, it must be good to do this, and then all of a sudden it's just being shattered, and it's actually not what the healthiest option is. And so I'm just really excited to kind of dig into to health, what it is, and kind of dig a little deeper into how to be healthy with this man. I think he's got a great perspective on it. So, Mr. Jones, thank you so much for coming on,
Thank you for inviting me.
of course. So, I want to ask you our introductory question. I'm really excited to ask you it. What is health? What does it mean? How does it manifest? What does it look like? You can take it any direction you want. And if you want to take it even further, what is excellent health?
I've been thinking about this for a while now because I know that you asked this question. And I'll give you three answers, and I think each one will be more true than the other. So, the Occam's razor answer, the most simple one, is that it's just when your body's working as intended. That's all. And the second definition is, I think, the truest one in terms of what humans call health, and that is the least amount of entropy in the cell, so the least amount of chaos and the most amount of order. Anything that's unhealthy will create more entropy. Anything that's healthy will create more order or maintain order. The third and most true definition of health, or not necessarily definition, is that it's a distinction. It's something that only exists in the mind. Humans have created it. In nature, it doesn't really exist. It's just a word that we use to address something intellectually. That's it.
Yeah, I think you put that very well, and that's really interesting. I want to kind of dive into a little bit more of your thoughts on what order is and what does that mean when you say order in the cell. Are you talking strictly biochemical? Are you talking energetically? Are you talking, because I think you could probably talk about this on many different levels. So maybe we can dig into that and then maybe get into the third definition a little bit more as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a good, if you want the appropriate person to address this, it would be Jack Cruz. I really got this idea from him. I had been thinking about it before, you know, health really being the strength and the efficiency of the cells. But then when I saw his physics definition, I thought, okay, well, this is this is the most correct definition. What it means is that everything results in heat death in the universe, and the human body is very interesting because it's not supposed to, or life is not supposed to work the way it does. So what happens is that our cells, the atoms inside, rearrange themselves so that they don't lose a lot of light, so that they decrease entropy as much as possible, because if they don't do that, they die. Uh, so so that's really what I mean. I mean that life is organizing itself in the most optimal way possible for it to last the longest, so that it doesn't succumb to what the rest of the universe generally succumbs to. So it's intelligent. It's a way of intelligently moving around matter, and also more than matter, I guess, to maintain life. That's what it is. And then anything that's unhealthy in the human sense will disturb that. Again, anything that's healthy will create disorder among the atoms that makes sure that you don't lose energy. It's all about energy conservation at the end of the day. That's really what I mean. Energy efficiency, and then that is also um, cell strength, really.
Something that's always interested me about this topic, especially, and it's interesting that you bring it up. Um, you know, the second law of thermodynamics and everything tends towards higher entropy, towards higher disorder. That's the law, right? I find it very interesting that life completely contradicts that, right? Because we're so highly ordered, and to me, this is one of the greatest evidence towards intelligent design and a creator. Um, and I've always found it fascinating, even before I went down all these, germ terrain, whatever. Like even like when I was in high school taking chemistry in grade 11, grade 12, I'm thinking, okay, so we have this law and then we have life that just completely contradicts it. Why does life contradict that? And then, like you're just kind of saying here, once you're moving towards death, you're becoming a little bit more disordered, right? Things aren't working as smoothly and organized as they should. And uh, you're tending towards a little bit more chaos. And I think it's a very interesting thing to me, that is one of the most fascinating things. And I think it's a major contradiction as well of the second law in a way, but um, we can save that for another discussion. Anyways, I think that's a great way to approach the conversation around health as well, especially when talking scientifically. Um, Sometimes it's difficult to talk about these concepts because, like you mentioned in your third definition, health is just something we talk about to serve our intellectual purposes. It doesn't exist in health in nature, and um, we've talked about this extensively in our appeal to nature videos, how trying to say that that's a fallacy to appeal to nature, to say what is healthy is natural, to me stands true time and time and time again. It will never fail. I guarantee that. Um, as long as we know what is natural, what's truly natural to the human being. Um,
Yeah, natural to humans, I should say. So snake venom is
100%.
also natural, but it's not natural to humans. And I have to give credit to Gattis for that idea, but it's a good way of putting it.
It is a very good way of putting it. Yeah, because I struggled that with that a little bit as well, right? Like, so poisons and venoms and things like that are getting mauled by a bear. These are natural events, but at the end of the day, it's like it's not the human life. It's not conducive to human life and a natural human life of longevity to get mauled by a bear. It's just something that happens, and to get into maybe the spiritual reasons for that is another different story as well. But yeah, I think this concept of health doesn't exist in nature is really important as well, because our bodies are very adaptive. I know you've spoken about this a little bit, how our bodies are very adaptive. We adapt to everything that we get thrown at it, right? So if you're in a toxic environment, your body's just going to adapt to that, and we call it disease, but our bodies are actually just trying to come back to some sort of order, in a way, to bring it into your second definition there. We're trying to get back to some sort of homeostasis and balance. Maybe you could speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, I mean, the body wants to stay alive, and it's pretty intelligent. So you throw pollution at it, and I, this is what I write in my book in the detoxification section. So imagine you're the body, and you're conducting everything that's happening, and suddenly you get this whiff of perfume with a bunch of carcinogens in it. Where do you put it? Like, do you put it in the fat cells? Where do you put it in the lymphatic system? Where in the bloodstream? And then in the bones? Like, where should it go? Where should it be stored? And if it's not supposed to be stored, if you're supposed to eliminate it through, breathing out through the lungs, um, why is that? And should it be through the lungs? And how much? And all of these things, really. So again, our bodies are intelligent. They know what they're doing. And I mean, wait, what is your question exactly?
Maybe I'd just like to hear a little bit about the adaptive qualities of our body, that we adapt to every single situation. Like any pollution that we're getting, like how, like I think you're going down a good trail here. How our bodies even know what to do with these toxicities, right? With these infractions, what.
Yeah, now I understand. Now I understand why I had to ask you again, because ultimately that knowledge is completely unknown to us. I have no idea, essentially, or anyone for that matter, doesn't know how the body really works. The body gets the pollution in, and it deals with it in the most beautiful manner possible. But it does that. It certainly does that. Otherwise, most people in modern society would be dead. So yes, it is very adaptable, and not only that. In terms of the adaptive quality, I'd say that in terms of nutrition, and not only nutrition, probably, we're the most adaptable mammal on the planet. And that has had to happen because we've spread out all across the world. So, with nutrition, for example, like if you were a lion, it would be pretty easy to figure out what you're supposed to eat. But with humans, it's really hard because like we can survive on potatoes for quite a long time. That doesn't mean that potatoes are healthy or that, fruits are healthy. It just means that our body is really, really, really adaptable. That's why you have vegans that can be vegan for 20 years plus with health problems. But they can do that because the body is adapting. The microbiome is adapting, and they're extracting a lot of stuff from the plants after a while, that humans aren't really supposed to do. Their microbiome is really, really adapting. Then you can talk about adaptation to, a colder environment, less vitamin D, or more UV. So, I, if the theory of us evolving at the African Rift is correct, then all humans were black. We used to be black. But then as we moved, we lost melanin, or we put it inside, and then we became really good at creating heat. So that's just another adaptation. And in terms of, you look at birds. Birds have different colors. They have different species all across the world. I think one of the most diverse, or birds aren't mammals, but one of the most diverse animals on the planet. You know, look at how Asians look as opposed to black people, as opposed to Arabs, as opposed to Native Americans, as opposed to, um, you know, the Andeans. That just speaks to how adaptable we are, really. And all these people look a different way because they've adapted to certain environments, um, and the way they look is related to the environment, of course. Like Weston A. Price, when he looked at the Peruvians that were living at very high altitudes, he noticed that their chest development was far greater than other, well, he said races, but usually we say ethnicities nowadays. And he said that it was probably because of the oxygen deprivation that they had over there, for example. So yes, and I think all life is very adaptable, because if it didn't adapt, then it wouldn't continue. Adaptation is absolutely needed. So again, it's not just the human body. The way we detoxify pollution, a cow does the same thing in the exact same way. It has the same intelligence. The bird does it the same way. It's not some intrinsic quality that we humans have. I'd say it's just something that life is able to do. A tree probably has pretty good detoxification pathways as well. Um, so yeah, we're more similar to other animals than we think. And yes, the reason life adapts is because without adaptation, there's no life. Because as the environment changes, life has to change.
Yeah, to me, it's absolutely undeniable fundamental axiom of existence, and I think I would really want to ask you, what are your thoughts on the Darwinian take of evolution? Because obviously a lot of his work is based off this, and I think this is a pretty pertinent topic.
What I can say for certain is that natural selection is 100% a thing, and that organisms do change over time. Otherwise, we wouldn't have dog breeds. Like you couldn't cross dogs and then get a new dog. If what is said in religious texts, or if you take it literally, is true, that all the animals were, well, let's say, intelligently designed and they don't change, which my mother, I don't know if she still believes that, by the way, but in any case, if that were true, then we wouldn't have other dog breeds. So uh, just the mere fact of humans, you have, let's say, someone from Ethiopia um, creating a family with someone from Asia, let's say, and them getting some uh, mix, their children being a mix of Ethiopian and Asian, that just speaks to natural selection, or there being the possibility of organisms changing, um, and also there being different forms of humans. That's just proof there. You have Africans, you have Asians, you have Japanese people, Chinese people, Slavic people, etc. That's just proof of natural selection there as well. And just creating a family. That's also proof of natural selection. Beyond that, going back quite a lot, it's very hard to say. It's very, very hard to say. I don't know what caused, because they say that it's because of mutations. I'm not sure if that's true. I honestly, what I know is that I'm looking at a screen right now talking to you. Um, that's it. More than that, I cannot know, but I can describe natural selection, and I know that it works. So, yeah, if you go back 10 million years, based on what's happening right now, based on the fact that we can create new dogs, yeah, we probably had ape ancestors. I think it's hard to deny that. But beyond that, going back and looking at the origins of life, that's I don't know. I really don't know how life emerged.
I always think it's really interesting. One of the, you know, people who talk about, they call it endosymbiont theory. I remember learning about it at school, how bacteria entered another bacteria, and that was the mitochondria, the cell, and blah, blah, blah. That's one of the major, widely accepted theories proposed by Lynn Margulis. Lynn Margulis actually was like an HIV denier, which I thought was a really interesting um, that she was aligned there, and then proposed this really interesting endosymbiont theory. Not sure if I agree with it. I mean, it's so speculative. It's not like it doesn't make sense totally either, right? That's one of the things about uh, the old school Darwinian stuff. Um, Obviously, neo-Darwinism, I think, is absolute nonsense when you're getting into like mutations, genetics, all the new age stuff is kind of a little off in my opinion, but it's just a way to kind of further explain and try to solidify in a way. But anyways, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you, kind of getting back on the topic of health here, and this isn't a question that I've asked, but you know, why should we try to achieve excellent health, right? And not just decent health. Obviously, I'm alluding to the name of your channel here a little bit, excellent health. But, I love that. I love that name, and I think that striving for excellence is very important. But why should someone want to do that? What drives you to do that? What kind of put you on that path, and why should other people do it?
Well, for me, it's pretty easy. I'll just answer for myself. I've always wanted to do things in the most optimal way possible. So let's say I'm buying a backpack. I want the absolute best backpack for that price point. If I'm buying a phone, I want the absolute best phone for the price point I'm thinking of. If I'm trying to learn about a topic, I want the absolute best teacher. If I'm going to play chess, I want to play at a very good accuracy, or I want to look at the games of the absolute best chess player, etc., etc. So with health, I mean, you have a body and it works a certain way, and it's it's the source of consciousness. It's your life itself. Without the body, there is no life. So let's liken it to a puzzle. You have a puzzle in front of you, and you're supposed to put it together in the way it's intended to be put together. Saying that you should strive for decent health is saying that let's put the puzzle together, but let's not make it perfect. Let's put some pieces, or let's not care about whether some pieces are in the wrong place or not. That's the way I view it. That's why you should strive for excellent health. You have a body, it works a certain way, and if it works a certain way, you need to make sure that you satisfy the criteria for it to work a certain way, which is, optimally.
Amazing, yeah. I think even, getting back to your first definition, the body functioning properly as it should, I think that's we can also get to that, right? Because if we're thinking about excellent health, we're thinking about the body just just thriving, and being able to function perfectly as you're mentioning here. Um, I think that's so important, and it's one of the most fundamentally true things that we know too, that we need to live in very basic sense,
We are
and
living.
exactly, it's the greatest evidence for it, so um, it seems so simple and obvious and maybe a little bit ridiculous, but I feel like a lot of people kind of get away from that. I feel like a lot of people get away from that, and they're caught up in things that are sub life things. Um, People who may have never experienced any sort of discomfort, like experiencing rain, or being cold, even stuff like that, simple stuff like that, being too hot, not having enough food or water, etc. Um, these are some fundamental struggles that happen and kind of, make that human experience feel very real. And then, you try to thrive. You always want to make sure that you're well fed, you have clean, good drinking water, and you have, but we're so far away from that, from the real human experience. And we're caught up in social media and video games and whatever a job. And maybe we try to excel at our job or at video games. People tend to want to be the best at those as well, but you're kind of sidetracked. And not to even say that you can't pursue these things, but it seems like it's very secondary to achieving, purity or health in our own physical vessels, right? In the things that drive our existence as a human being. I think that's one of the things that we've lost, just experiencing life as a human being, just being a human being living, so um
Yeah, I mean, people always, no matter what person it is, really, they're always managing their life. They're always trying to do what they think is the most important. And the problem isn't necessarily that people aren't taking care of their lives, it's just that their priorities are wrong. That's it. So with the video games and with whatever it is, they are still doing their best to manage their life. That decision is a decision that comes out of self survival. It still is them thinking that this decision right now is the best. That's why they took that decision.
Mm.
Um, but what underlies that entire system is wrong, and that's from time to time this happens to civilizations, and we're at the point right now where, yeah, people are degenerating, and this is what you see. Instead of taking care of their health, when they self manage in a way that's destructive.
Yeah, yeah, it seems a little bit cyclical, and then you obviously see fruits in the form of disease and even mental illnesses, stuff like that. That seems to even be later in the game, because we've had these very obvious physical diseases for in the modern world for a while, but mental illness is extremely high nowadays, which I think is really interesting. Why that comes sort of after. And maybe we're not taking the right read on history. Maybe we didn't recognize mental illness back in the day. Maybe we didn't recognize it as much as we do now, and maybe we over recognize it now. That's probability as well.
I just made a community post about this, by the way. I was talking about Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Weston A. Price, and the fact that I had never read it from cover to cover. I bought it recently just to do that because I've always said that it's one of the greatest, or probably the greatest health book ever written, and I haven't read it. So that's pretty hypocritical. So I don't want to miss anything from that book. And what he says in the beginning is that, yes, there is physical degeneration, but what we're seeing mostly in society now is moral degeneration. So the mental stuff actually came first, according to Weston A. Price. So in America, yes, you did see the degeneration of the teeth. You did see deformities, but what he saw the most outside of physical degeneration is the degeneration of morals and the mental faculties. That's what he saw. So it's always like it's a linear relationship between ill health and the mental illness. So it's never it might be hidden to history, but it's not hidden to those who lived during that era or any era.
Yeah, I'm thinking back on now. I'm thinking back on a quote that I remember reading. I don't think it was Hippocrates. It might have been Epictetus. It was disease of the mind is often more common than a physical disease. I'm probably paraphrasing a little bit there, and I'm probably not remembering who said it. It might have been Hippocrates. Anyways, I mean, that obviously dates back a very long time. So I think that's a really interesting observation. One that I didn't catch when I read it. And I would agree that that is the best health book, best nutrition book out there for sure. Maybe not holistic health, but if you interpret it properly and you understand that you do need to look beyond diet a little bit, right? Like obviously he wasn't talking about EMFs and he wasn't very specific always in what natural food is and natural water and even community values like you're mate alluding to here a little bit, right? Like these individuals, they danced and they ate with their families and communities, and there was a very strong connection there. So sometimes it does go beyond diet a little bit, but that diet piece is very fundamental, of course. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, with the Swiss, if you read the first section where he's analyzing modern and isolated people, he's he's impressed that in the village they do not have any police or any um, sheriff, anything like that. They don't need it. The village doesn't need it. There is no individual within that village who would think or go so low as to hurt somebody else in that village. And people like to say that it's a utopia to think that every individual in a society would, from a probability standpoint, uphold such morals. But I don't think so because the example is there in the book. Uh, that is possible. And if all the correct criteria are met, you can have such a society. And humans are supposed to live like that. It's just that, yeah, we need a little bit more consciousness and a little bit more health.
Definitely. Yeah. So I kind of want to ask you what was one of the most shocking revelations that you've ever had surrounding health? What was one of those things that was like there was a lot of resistance before you could accept it, but you finally realized, wow, this is undeniably true. Uh, if you don't got anything on the top of your head, I could probably give you one. That was for me
You,
shocking.
I know where you want to go with this, but I'm going to surprise you. It was actually porn and masturbation. Yes,
100%. Please
taking taking
elaborate.
that taking that seriously, understanding the health risks there. That was the most, I would not necessarily the most shocking one, but it's the most hard one to accept, the most hard one to get into my brain. Because most people my age in modern society, and also younger and also older, they've been hooked since early teenage years. Like for me, it was between 11 and 12. So for me, I'd say that, and the brain degeneration part. It's not that it shocked me. It's just that it put a lot of if you continue doing this and you know that your brain is degenerating, why are you doing this if for every other thing that you've ever encountered you've immediately switched to doing it optimally, quitting it or introducing it, depending on what it is. So the most shocking thing was that. Then when it comes to raw meat, because I know you want to go there, um, I remember when I was a vegan. I remember, I was a fan of Vegan Gains. And he obviously did debates with, well, first Gatis, Sverige, and then he did debates with Frank Tefano. But with the Sverige ones, you find that his channel, because you look it up, because Vegan Gains is talking about him, then you click on a full day of eating video, and as a person who had never seen raw animal foods diets, like this guy was taking out a raw goddamn liver and eating it. And I remember being shocked. How is this guy not dead eating that? Why is he eating that? It was really really shocking. Um, but in terms of actually accepting the fact that raw meat might be a good thing, Arginus, as an individual, when he spoke about these things, I'd say it was pretty methodical. His lectures or workshops, as he called them, they were pretty methodical in the way he explained the matter was not shocking in any way if you're used to animal-based diets, which I was at the time of listening to Arginus's workshops and being introduced to his work. So nothing has really shocked me, I'd say. I'm not the type of person to get shocked very easily, I'd say. But with porn and masturbation, that's the only thing that has been accepting the brain degeneration. That's the main thing for me.
I'm really interested actually in that topic. Um, we've talked a lot about raw meat. You can go and find more stuff on your channel as well about raw meat. So maybe we can save that. You know, I actually didn't have that much resistance towards the raw meat. At that point, I was already kind of, the terrain was what really shocked me the most. If I were gonna go there, it really did. I had the most resistance to that. So once I got over that hump, nothing shocks me anymore. I try not to even have any resistance towards anything. People say things to me and I just try to wholly consider it as, objectively as possible. But I think when you're talking about something like porn and masturbation, that's something that has a lot of resistance. Because like you mentioned, young men getting into it at a very, very early age, it's very ingrained in our minds, and everything appeals to that. All the advertisements and our world in general is so sexualized and, you know, they're taking advantage of these young men. And it's very effective if you want to take advantage of individuals like that. Um, you know, I'm really interested in kind of how you came to into this knowledge and what you found that was really helpful in changing your perspective on it, because this is something that men will resist until they die. There'll be many men that will resist this. It doesn't matter what you tell them. I mean, like maybe there are some things that you could say. So what are those really convincing pieces that really helped you understand this better?
I don't think it was anything that was necessarily health related. I think it was understanding addictions better. So what helped me was the easy peasy method. That's really what helped me, if you know about it. But there's this man called Alan Carr. He wrote a book called The Easy Way, and it's a way of quitting smoking just through reading a book. And he doesn't force you to quit smoking. He says you can smoke as much as you want when reading this book. Just when you finish the book, you can stop smoking. And he explains to you that the reason you continue smoking is because of the last cigarette. It's not because you're addicted, it's just because of withdrawal pangs. And if you and the only reason you get withdrawal pangs is because you crave cigarettes, because you see value in them. And he tries to remove the value of them so that you get the withdrawal pang out of the way, so that when you encounter it once you stop smoking, there is no value attached to actually smoking, because you understand that this is going to lead you into a rabbit hole that's never going to end. Uh, and so many people have read that book and they've stopped smoking. And it applies to any addiction. So there's this guy called Fraser Patterson, a guy from Australia. He wrote a hack book of it called the Easy Peasy Method. So a hack book is you take a book and you adapt it to, let's say, in another form, but it's essentially the same book. So he did that and he published it for free on the internet. There's also an audiobook. And instead of smoking, it's all about porn. Not necessarily, excessive masturbation, but quitting porn, because that's the main issue. I'd say watching porn will drive you to masturbate far more than you just having masturbation, because of the dopamine and everything. So I found that book, um, and this wasn't too long ago. This was actually in 2022. But there, I have more history regarding this topic. I have a very long streak before that in my teenage years, etc. But again, I fell into it again, unfortunately. So I read that book and immediately, boop, I understood the nature of the addiction, and I was able to quit quite easily. Then I fell into it again. But then I found that together with a social support structure, and not family members and everything, but you tell your friend, this is essentially what it is. You tell your friend, if I do the deed or watch anything, you get $100. And if you're like me and you tend to try to be honest and you really don't like losing money, it's a really effective way of quitting, because once you go 2 weeks to mostly 30 days, the probability of you doing it again is going to be very, very low, because you've reset your brain to some degree to baseline levels. And then, once you go 90, 120 days, 1 year, then your brain is in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
If you eat well and your circadian habits are good, etc., etc. So, in terms of quitting, these are the things that someone should do. Outside of that, I mean, again, as I mentioned, in terms of the health effects, if someone really responds to understanding how something is bad for them when it comes to this topic, I don't respond in terms of that in that way when it comes to this topic,
Hmm.
but with everything else I do. Brain degeneration. There are studies published that show that people who are well, people who view a lot of porn, they have less gray matter in the brain. There are a bunch of areas in the brain that shrink the more you view porn. So once you know that, it's very hard to continue, because it's exactly like taking a drug. And the mechanism behind this, by the way, I've been thinking about this. When you watch porn, you have to increase your dopamine quite a lot.
Hmm.
Now, dopamine, if I'm not mistaken, you create it from tryptophan. I believe it's tryptophan, yes. And you can also create it from melanin. And melanin is really important in the brain. Um, Melanin turns into L-dopa and then to dopamine. But in any case, if I'm not mistaken, if you constantly have to elevate your dopamine because of what's happening in your environment, especially if it's linked to reproduction, your body will your body views reproduction as more important than most things, because we're talking about reproduction here. So it will make sure that you get the dopamine response. It will make sure that you desire whatever it is that you're seeing on the screen. And so it has to create dopamine. So where is it going to get it from if it's created in the brain? The brain cells. So it has to take nutrients from the brain cells to create this dopamine, to create this dopamine flush, and whatever else is happening in the brain. There's a lot of activation going on over there. Um, to respond to the environment, which is the porn viewing. And so that's how it causes brain degeneration and also nervous system degeneration, etc., etc. And that's why in many cases you see that people who are well, let's say not so chaste, they tend to have hair loss. It's related. Nervous system abuse and hair loss, those go hand in hand. So that's why it's a very good idea if someone has hair loss to probably go on SR, semen retention. But yeah,
Wow.
that's my take on the subject.
Hmm. Yeah, I think from a very physical standpoint as well, I think every time you release, I think there's quite a lot of nutrients and minerals being lost, and also what's required to even produce at that rate if you're constantly releasing, right? So I think there's that likely be a part of it. You're mentioning, depletion from a different standpoint. Depletion really seems like the underlying piece, right? You're being depleted physically, you're being depleted mentally, you're not nearly as motivated, it's such a it's a sedative, right? You're so sedated after, you're not trying to go out and achieve better health, because why would you need to be more healthy and more optimal and, a better warrior, hunter, father, whatever it may be? You don't have that purpose anymore because you just achieved that dopamine hit, if we want to explain it in these terms, that you were like you were seeking that before, right? That's what you were kind of striving for, and you can just get it whenever you want, right? So there's kind of that mental part of it. People always talk about the spiritual side of it, right? You're losing your energy, your life force, stuff like that. I think there's a pretty solid argument behind that as well. I remember learning about this in my history of medicine course, actually at university, believe it or not. It was probably one of the better courses I've ever taken at university. And he spoke about, the seed and it being a microcosm of the body, contains everything that it needs to become another life force, right? With obviously the female counterpart. Um, it's very just philosophically how they spoke about it in these times was very illuminating, in how, powerful this substance really is. One of the most vital, powerful substances on earth, like the egg, right? Some of the healthiest foods, like eggs, oysters, are whole, right? Things that are, it's a whole substance, right? It's a half of a whole, I guess, in a way, but um, it's a very, very, you don't want to be just releasing that, all the time, right? And you can think about it from three very obvious standpoints: physical, spiritual, the mental, right? So the brain degeneration piece, I think, is one of the most fascinating things that is not spoken about. Obviously, the detrimental effects aren't really spoken about too often, but um, a lot of people don't smoke because of that. A lot of people don't, do drugs because of that, because of the brain degeneration piece or the real unhealthy side of it. So I think getting the word out around that could be really helpful as well. And I don't think that's talked about enough. Obviously, none of what we're talking about on our YouTube channels and podcasts and social media is just being talked about enough. But here's just another part of the coin.
I will add that with when it comes to resources, if someone wants a good resource, there is the website, and it's the most popular website, Your Brain on Porn. That's a good website in terms of studies, in terms of science. And another thing is, in modern society, this stuff is really available. So back in the day, it wasn't available. And I'm not talking about like 50 years ago. I'm talking about 500 years ago, even farther back than that. Uh, but with 500 years ago, you had people living on farms. There, nothing like that exists, and it's much easier to avoid it if it doesn't exist. So I will say, just adding to the other methods that I talked about, if someone is able to go to an environment where you can't do it or it doesn't exist, so you woof on a farm. Woofing is, you go to an organic farm, and you work there. Pretty popular with young people. I learned about it from Varus Samad. If you go there, and let's say it's a place where you don't have any internet, which would be ideal, you can't do it. You don't have access to that stuff. So that's the absolute best way to quit. You go to a place where it doesn't exist. That's the most effective way. If you've tried everything and it doesn't work.
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, that environment piece is huge. It could go for health as well, like often a lot of people when they're in these, third stage cancer states, they go down to an organic retreat where they spend a month, 2 months, whatever it is, where it's a absolutely pure and optimal environment. And they don't have to worry about accidental toxicities, stuff like that. It makes it very easy to eat pure organic food and avoid EMFs and get sunlight every day, stuff like that, right? So, um, obviously, a great addition there. That's amazing. Great conversation about that. I mean, I guess we can kind of roll into the other shocking thing. We got a couple minutes left here. Um, Eating raw, pure foods, something that obviously is making a comeback, like comeback in a way, right? The natural human diet. But um, for a while, the trend was to eat raw plant foods. You mentioned that you were ex-vegan. Um, I even briefly there, I thought I didn't act, but I thought that a pure plant-based diet, raw foods, was the optimal human diet. There was a time that I thought that very briefly, and I never stopped eating steak, so I'm really happy about that. But um, I'm curious about your experience there. Now I find that everything that I've learned in researching the raw plant diet, a lot of the logic still applies to consuming raw animal products. I find it's the most unadulterated food. It's hydrating, it's full of minerals, it's not, you know, uh, denatured at all, stuff like that. Like a lot of these fundamental principles, I think, still hold true. Curious about your transition from plants to, you mentioned vegan gains. I remember watching him back in the day. He was an entertaining guy to watch, and doing the debates and all that. That was fun. But yeah, I'm curious about your transition there.
Yeah, so I was at I had been vegan for like a year and a half, a year and yeah, something like a year and a bunch of months. And I had acne, I had bloating, I had all these health issues. And I wanted to get rid of them. Through Vegan Gains, I found Frank Tufano, and I started watching Frank Tufano's, nowadays older videos about nutrition. Nowadays, he doesn't make videos about nutrition really, but the old videos are really helpful. And he was talking about how high quality animal foods are the most nutrient dense and bioavailable, and how plants don't have this and they don't have that, and they're not bioavailable, and that your animal foods, specifically this point was important, your animal foods should come from healthy animals. So a cow needs to be grass fed in a very nice environment. And I thought, well, if a cow is in a very nice environment, that's pretty ethical, isn't it? Because I was also thinking about the ethics as well. So I thought, well, if these animal foods are coming from these nice environments, and what he's saying is true, then I don't really have a problem considering eating them. So I got some Parmesan cheese to begin with, and no, actually, I started with a boiled egg. Got a horrible allergic reaction because of the leaky gut and everything, so I still can't eat eggs, by the way. And then I tried Parmesan cheese, and my acne got worse. And I was measuring everything, all the animal foods, through acne, like if it got worse or not. With the Parmesan cheese, or I should say Parmigiano Reggiano, because it was raw, of course, it still got worse. Then I tried meat, and it was the 1st of July 2019. Yes. I tried it and I thought I would get constipated. And it was cooked, of course. Three steaks, small steaks. Thought that I would get constipated. Thought I would get some problems. Checked myself, the first day, woke up the second day because you get the acne the second day. Checked my face. No, didn't get worse. Bowel movements were fine. Felt good. Said, okay, good. I'll continue eating meat. So my diet became cooked meat with broccoli. That's one meal, and then the second meal was oatmeal. I used to eat a bunch of oatmeal, huge bowls of oatmeal. I used to soak it, and I used to put things in it. But in any case, that continued, from July to, let's say, November. November, I got introduced to Ogenes's work through Frank Tufano again, listened to the workshop, started eating raw meat, transitioned to it in November. But the oatmeal was still there. Then in January, I thought I have to remove the oatmeal to make progress with the acne because the acne had gotten better. There are a few steps I took in between, but in any case, I got raw milk from a Facebook group. I tried that, and I thought, okay, this is gonna replace the oatmeal because I was thinking of calories. I didn't want to lose weight. I wanted to be pretty buff. Used to work out a lot at that point. And I got an allergic reaction again. Even when fermented, even in the fermented state, I got an allergic reaction. So I said, okay, F this. I didn't want to consume two meat meals because at the time, or not at the time, I didn't want my father or my family to pay too much for the meat. Oatmeal is much cheaper. So it was an economical thought. But then I thought, it's like I really need to eat two meat meals. There's no other way to do it. So I transitioned to that. So I started eating two raw meat meals a day. And that was the first time I had drastically lowered my carbohydrate consumption. So for 3 weeks, I was becoming fat adapted. And after the 3 weeks, I felt okay, now I can run on fat without too many problems. And then, yeah, that was my transition from veganism to a raw animal based diet.
Wow, interesting. Yeah. I find it really interesting with the reactions that you had. So now you say you still can't consume eggs, even raw.
Yes.
And and what about milk now? How's it?
Yeah, milk is fine. Milk is fine. No
Milk
problems.
is fine. Yeah,
When I
interesting.
began consuming it again a year later, 15 no 14 months after that, so this was when I consumed it and got an allergic reaction, and then I went on to raw animal foods completely. That was in January 2020. I got raw milk again after having been on that diet for 14 months, uh, in March 2021. I started consuming raw milk in its fresh state. I got an allergic reaction. Then I fermented it, still got an itchy throat, itchy ears a little bit, but then I noticed that it wasn't bad, so I could drink it again. And then 5 glasses into that, not on the same day, of course, spaced out, the allergic reaction went away. So then
Hmm.
I consumed it for, man, actually, I quit drinking raw milk from the source that I had gotten it from all these years, like a month ago, 2 months ago, something like that. And that's because they have A1 Holstein cows, and I um, asked them about what they were feeding them, or if they used no, I asked them if they use pesticides on the farm anywhere, and they said yes, we do spray the grains. It's to kill weeds. And then they said that they give the grains to the cows. So I thought, oh, okay, so I've been drinking pesticides all this time. So yeah, I had to quit, and I noticed that when I quit, when I went periods without the raw milk now, my heart rate went down. So I have had an elevated heart rate, and I believe it has been because of the pesticides in the milk. Something is wrong with the milk. It's A1 milk, and it has pesticides in it, and it was just doing something that's very wrong. So I quit it, and now I feel fine. I used to need it for digestion. Now my
Hmm.
digestive tract is fine because of the raw milk, even though it has pesticides. Speaks to the power for animal foods, and so I don't need it anymore.
Interesting. So I'm really curious about what your thoughts are on allergies.
It's I think I remember Ogden said, yeah, he said that it was because you eat something and it's the cooked food being detoxified. I think that's wrong. I think his
Yeah.
model is wrong. That might be the case sometimes, maybe, but not in most cases. I think the problem is a mix of the alternative health space and the standard medical establishment. I think they have this nailed down pretty well. So you eat something and you have leaky gut, and this is for intolerances mainly. You eat something and you have leaky gut, and it goes into the bloodstream, and it's not supposed to be in the bloodstream. So your body tags it and says This is not supposed to be in the bloodstream. And again, all the bad effects of leaky gut happen. It goes to the brain, the joints, it gets detoxified through the skin, you get acne, etc. All the bad effects of leaky gut. Um, but it also tags it with a B cell. So it remembers a memory B cell, I'm pretty sure it's called. And this is standard medical establishment stuff. It tags it and it remembers it. So then it's able to detect it at the mouth. And so it
Hmm.
detects it as pollution, and you get this or yeah, you could say allergic reaction, intolerance reaction, whatever you want to call it. But that's mainly for intolerances. And that's what most people have with eggs, with milk, etc. And when once they heal the leaky gut and they make sure that the mast cells relax a little bit, then usually they're able to do introduce it in small amounts, and then they're able to consume these foods again. With allergies, what I've noticed is that people who are pretty polluted get them.
Mm.
That's just the pattern I've seen. That when someone has a bunch of heavy metals in their system, they haven't lived in a very good manner. They suddenly get hay fever, pollen allergies, all of these things that they didn't have before. And what's interesting is that I've also seen that if you get enough sunlight, or if you don't get enough sunlight, you also get this problem. I think it's because sunlight is a great detoxifier as well because of melanin and exclusions on water, but that's another story. Those two things, being vitamin D deficient and having a lot of pollution in the body. I think for general allergies, so not intolerances, but for general allergies, that's what I've seen contribute the most to these problems.
Amazing. Cool. Awesome, brother. Uh, Probably a good time to wrap it up. Let me hear some final thoughts on the episode. Anything you want to add? Anything you think you might have missed? Now's the time to add it in.
I don't know. And I think that it's okay. I think not knowing, uh, no, not knowing always comes prior to knowing. So being in that state is a very good idea um, for whatever it is that one is doing at any moment.
Beautiful. Well, I don't think that we could end on a better note than that. We say that all the time. It's important to be comfortable with the unknown, with not knowing. So I think that's a really good point that not many of us can do, and it kind of comes back to even earlier in the episode when I asked you about the mechanism or the process of maybe detoxification. In a way, I'm probably simplifying it maybe a little too much, but um, you mentioned that nobody knows this, and we live in a world where a lot of people would claim to know these things, right? They claim to know a lot when in fact we might not know as much as we do. And for me, being uncomfortable in that unknown was one of the most helpful things in trying to understand a little bit more about our reality and understanding more about health, and just being able to improve my judgment on what I believe is true and false. So that's great. Jones, how can the listener find you, listen to more of your work? How can they support you?
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel called Excellent Health. My main work is over there. And yeah, I do have other social media accounts, but I wouldn't want anyone to go there because no, but the main, the main work, the main way someone can be productive is through the YouTube channel. So I wouldn't want to recommend anything else. And then once they've looked at the YouTube channel, I do have a free PDF called The Rules of Nutrition, and then I have a book, but that's you'll learn about that inside the Rules of Nutrition. And then again, once someone is acquainted with my work and they trust me, then if they do have some issues that they like to discuss, I do consultations. But in general, I think for most people, if you dig into my videos, you'll find quite a lot of good stuff. And I mean, your podcast is also a great source of information as well. So that's also something I can recommend. And just to throw that out there, because the most important thing is the viewer. Check out Jack Cruz's work. The guy is a gold mine. Uh, but yeah,
Amazing.
that's all.
Yeah. Amazing, amazing, brother. I appreciate that too. So, yeah, that's great. Well, I'll put the links down below for everyone to go and be able to access that really easily. So, thank you so much for coming on, man. This has been a great discussion. We'll have to do it again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I want to thank you all for listening. You should all know that this is, of course, not medical advice and for your informational purposes only. But also remember that we're all responsible sovereign beings capable of thinking, criticizing, and understanding absolutely anything. We, the people in the greater forces, are together self healers, self governable, self teachers, and so much more. Make sure to reach out with your thoughts on the videos. Give us any questions, criticisms, comments, concerns. I love to hear it all. You know where to find me on Instagram. You can send me an email if you'd like. You can probably find that somewhere around the websites or the social medias or whatever it may be. Really appreciate you all for taking the time to listen. If you found it informative in any way, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Review is a great way to help the podcast grow. That's probably one of the best ways to help the podcast, aside from, of course, sharing to a friend, family member, someone who can benefit from this sort of information. Uh, so, yeah, thanks for coming to check it out. Remember, there are two types of people in the world: those who believe they can, those who believe they can't, and they are both correct. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care.